wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today we are discussing what to do with screen time, particularly as we enter these holiday, seasonal, post-Christmas, often screen crashes.
Yeah.
And before we jump into that, we'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe with your email address. Once a week, we will send you wrap-up email with everything we've put out in the world with links so you can pick and choose what you'd love to click into a little bit deeper. Occasionally, we'll send you a second love letter where we dive into something more intimate, a toolkit, a conversation we've had between ourselves that we think might be something you would love to sink your teeth into. So jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe.
So screens, it seems like such a parenting minefield these days with, particularly parents of teenagers, I would say, quite, at a loss to know what to do around connection with their kids, boundaries.
I actually think that it's a problem from probably 2-year-olds and up. But I actually think why the teenager thing gets harder is because we lose control and they're interested in adult things.
Yeah. See, it's funny because I haven't been thinking about that because I'm pretty hard ass around screens, so I don't really, it's not really a problem for me with a nearly 5-year-old because we really didn't do TV before 2. Yeah. The iPad's only used for looking up Lego instructions. But, he wants it, but I also recognise that any time that I've given too much of it, it's been a constant desire to have it. So I scaled it right back, but I really recognise how that's probably more of a rarer thing than perhaps what's common because screens are so easy. It's very, very easy to give a screen, and kids love screens. And I think particularly these days with the proliferation of smartphones, it's getting younger and younger. It's very easy to entertain a toddler with a quick game or a quick, movie. And when we're busy, I totally see why that happens. But as you say, and we want to talk about this from the perspective of perhaps those tougher years, I think, when there is the less control of how that perhaps manifests as a sense of disconnection in relationship and disconnection with self, which are two, what I see as the kind of underbellies of screen time. And then how we then create space for kids to have that level of autonomy, but at the same time, how do we bring connection in so that it doesn't manifest in the more undesirable ways, I suppose. How do you want to come at it?
I've got so many thoughts flying through my head. So maybe I'll just, do a big dump on you and then we can pull it apart from there. What do you reckon?
Let's do it.
Okay. So you screened the movie screenagers, and then my school that my kids go to was one of a cluster that screened screenagers as well. So I actually went and saw it there. I don't think there's anything particularly new in it, but like we were saying last week with just keeping your toe dipped in, so it's nice just to have a conscious conversation around it because it keeps it in your consciousness. And that's partly what I enjoyed about it. But there are a few things that stood out to me in that documentary. One of those things was this whole concept of disconnect to reconnect.
Yeah.
And I've absolutely made that part of our family motto now. How you were saying teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah.
I now go disconnect to reconnect.
Yeah. I love it.
And look, I think not so much me, but I do notice it with my husband. He can disappear into his phone pretty easily.
Yeah.
And so I do, honestly, he probably shits me more than the kids do with that because there's no rules for an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's rules for a kid, and I don't like the double standard. And I am, interpersonal relationships is a top value of mine. And so I'm constantly seeking ever greater levels of connection. And so when someone's got a screen in the way, you're not really with me. If you're with me, be with me.
Yeah.
Don't be here in person, but in no other capacity are you actually with me.
Yeah.
So I can't stand coffee where the phone's right next to you and we're checking our phone and we're jumping on da-da-da-da-da. Can't stand it. I just, you know, I don't ever feel like I'm really with someone if they're on their phone all of the time. So disconnect to reconnect. And the reason that really hit home to me too, it was the first time I'd really connected that the world's, you know, most profound companies in accelerating the curve of, you know, this revolution, Google, who else would there be? Apple, Facebook, all of these incredibly dynamic companies disconnect in order to create the very thing that you want to connect to.
Yeah.
Because they recognize that human potential, that genius, and that human connection is actually what fuels humans' capacity for imagination, for creativity, and for well-being. And when I really made that connection, I went, holy fuck, of course, because we're disconnecting in order to study and produce the very thing that makes you want to stay on it longer. Like, it's kind of crazy.
And I mean, it's telling that so many people in Silicon Valley don't let their kids have, you know,
it's very
technology. And also there's a massive cluster of Waldorf schools, like Steiner schools, that they send their kids to, which strictly don't have technology, right?
Yeah.
Because they recognise that it is addictive, deeply addictive, and it is structured that way.
Yes, exactly. And is researched that way in order to facilitate that. And so when I think about, you know, all of the virtual tours I've seen through, you know, Google and Facebook headquarters, thank you. All I can think about is the rooms they have with beanbags for people just to hang out, and the exercise spaces, and the, you know, the pods where they, you know, meditate or chat to each other, and I just keep seeing human connection, areas of total disconnection in order to facilitate our greatest potential and greatest ability to connect.
Yeah.
And it sits so deeply for me that that disconnect to reconnect makes so much sense to me. And I think I felt like, you know, boom, in that movie, it just kind of all, you know, hit me in one moment where I went, oh my God, yes, that makes so much sense. And we use screens to evade, to get out, to get away.
Screens are the classic, you know, it's a classic modern day tool of numbing. Like, you know, who needs a wine when you've got a screen, right? That you can numb the uncomfortable
scroll the painful feelings away. Yeah, it's totally true.
But often, you know, create new ones.
Yeah,
as we know.
That's true too. So I got that as a really big epiphany in that documentary, which, you know, to some extent altered just the intensity, I suppose, I brought that within my family, or the explanation I gave to my older kids around why it was so important. And the other bit I really got from it, which I found really incredibly interesting, was that there was one family they interviewed in that documentary whose child was, you know, a high-achieving, you know, A-grade kind of student, went to college and essentially got so addicted on screens because there was now no control, because parents had control, that he ended up in what they now have in America, which is screen rehab centres, which I didn't even know existed.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, like pretty profound.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a few things hit home to me about that. One of them was the families that seemed to manage it really well had recharge stations, and everybody plugged their phone or device into that by a certain time at night, or else it didn't get recharged and you didn't therefore have it the next day.
Yeah.
So we've set up a recharge station. Admittedly, it's a little bit, you know, ho-hum at the moment. I want to work out how to make it more functional or stylised or whatever. But at the moment, everybody's devices, including my laptop and phone and everything, all go in one place.
Yeah.
And when they're not in use, they're in the one place. And we don't have any screens after 7 o'clock at night. They're all in the one place. So, and I spent a lot of time talking to my kids about, because they thought, oh, well, we don't have screen time, we can jump on and do homework. When I'm getting the younger two to bed, the older two could get on screen time because all homework is now done online.
Yeah.
You don't have it in homework books anymore.
Yeah.
And so we then led on to conversations around, no, you need a break from the blue light and the stimulation of a screen at least an hour before you go to bed. But I have friends who send their kids to bed with a screen.
Yeah.
Or who, you know, text each other, night mum, on the phone instead of coming up to say goodnight. And honestly, that terrifies me. We have an absolute rule of no screens in bedrooms. Screens including, and that's why I won't actually at this point in time put a desk in my children's rooms, because I don't actually want them secluded on a screen, which is exactly where all of their homework will be now.
Yeah,
You start on an iPad and a laptop now. They're eliminating textbooks, they're eliminating workbooks. Like, it's all done online, it's all virtual. Communication with the school is all virtual. So I don't actually want my children in a room on their own on a screen that I have absolutely no awareness and they have no capacity to, think about what they're doing, when they're completely locked away.
Yeah.
So homework in my house is done in the lounge room or on the family dining table, and everyone can see the screen. And it's a little bit noisier, but I think that's okay too, because if you're really focused, I'm happy for them to put headphones on with some music that they want to listen to if they need to chill out. Mostly it becomes like white noise in the background, or it allows for the minute conversations, the this, the that, I'm struggling with this, I'm not sure about that, and I get to stay in touch with what they're doing, because or else I would have no idea.
Yeah, and it'd be so easy for them to just hold themselves up in their room.
Completely. I have no idea what they're watching, what they're exposed to, what they've accidentally clicked on. And I do check my browser history too. So we've got all the normal control stuff. And I do check the browser history because occasionally it actually came up because I opened up I opened up Chrome or something, and it must have hit back on the previous thing, and this, flashed up this kind of porno site with these enormously huge-breasted women, or girls, young, they were girls, on the screen. I was like, what the heck is this? And I went back in the history and I realised my son had been watching YouTube clips on, it was like this, wildlife hunter, like crocodile man kind of thing, and there was obviously an ad that had popped up. He's clicked on the ad, and there's these bare-breasted
And this is why I won't
girls.
let my 4-year-old watch YouTube on the iPad.
Yeah, I get it.
Like, I just won't.
No, I really get it. But that's also why I expect that screens are in the vicinity that I'm in, because I need to know what they're watching. And particularly on YouTube, they all love YouTube because they can find all of these virtual reality kids. Like, kids now are making their own YouTube channels. Like, my daughter watches them all the time. There's one that does, she like makes all these crazy food combinations and eats them, and another one that's like a contortionist. Like, they're super cool things that they're watching.
And that's the thing. There is some awesome stuff on the internet, but I think, as we know as adults, sometimes our own level of self-regulation leaves a bit to be desired. So what hope do our kids have?
No, that's exactly right. Anyway, so long story short, screens are not hidden anywhere. They're literally not allowed in bedrooms. And we have a recharge station. So all of this kind of was in the works, but I hadn't gotten really crystal clear on until I watched Screenagers. And then I was like, right, no, I'm really ready for some really clear boundaries, not these kind of fuzzy, wishy-washy ones on it.
Yeah.
I probably honestly use the iPad with my older two more than what I do now with my younger one. Now I find it a pain in the ass because she's constantly needing to... The device is meant to just entertain them, right?
Yeah.
Whereas she's constantly asking me, well, they're this and they're that, and can you press this, and how come this app's not working, and how come I can't buy that in this in-app purchase?
Yeah.
And so in actual fact, it's a pain in the ass. So I just basically haven't used them at all, including she gets dragged everywhere. But I would rather take stickers and some paper.
Yeah.
And I would rather she had tools that she knew how to use and she was happy to open-ended play with than something that was not where she was at, and it's
it creates a whole bunch of work for you.
A whole bunch of work for me, and at the same time it's a screen just not using the same level of imagination that I perceive. But I also want to challenge that because I do think screens can be incredibly educating as well. So I'll give you examples of that. So I think there's the usual, learning, you're exposed to different things, different people and different ways of being, and I think YouTube channels are part of that. My son, I know, is obsessed with watching NBA highlights or different kids doing different things, in basketball scene, and I will literally watch it and he'll rewind it and watch it again, and then he'll go outside and he'll practice it. And he's got his little, they've both got iPod touches now, and so he'll put it, plonks it down, he watches it, presses pause, has a go at it, comes back to it, watches it again, presses pause, has another go at it. And so
useful.
Then I actually saw him, he was obsessed with this Kyrie spin move or something like that, and I'd watched him for weeks work in the mornings doing it. And then I saw him do it again, like just try it out at a game. And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
Because had you not had the exposure to that level of learning, you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And so there's also an area for screens. The kids at school now have got these things called Sparrows or Spheros. Have you seen those around? They're these little computerized little robot balls, basically. You can get them in National Geographic. They're pretty cool. And so they're coding balls. So they're attached to an iPad with a program and you can code them. So you can code them to speak. You can code them to change colour. And you can code them to run a track, like a mouse track, like a maze.
Oh, cool.
And so they're using them now in school to teach maths and to learn coding, but at the same time, you know, get it to all these different things. So they're making like mazes in their minds that they work up, and then they're trying to code it to make it do what they want it to do. Like super cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, that's pretty inspiring and amazing. And just as an ability to chill out, I think screens can be great just to chill out. I love watching a movie. I love knowing that, you know, I can be feeling a certain way and I can almost pick a movie or a program that will match the way I'm feeling, and it allows an outlet for that emotion.
Yeah.
So how much do I love to watch when I'm feeling soppy or sad or emotional, to watch a movie that makes me cry?
Yeah.
So I think there's totally ways that screens add to our lives, but I don't think it should be unlimited. And I'm super strict on the times of it. And I talk about the fallout from it. So if my kids watch screens first thing in the morning after they've got up, so they're not allowed to watch screens on a school morning, but on a weekend they're allowed to get up and watch screens. So which is lovely because we get to hang out and have a sleep in.
Yeah.
But the fallout of that is they're disconnected and cranky when they get off them. So, you know, often they're cranky when they've gone off, and we're like, well, this is why, right? Now you started your day like this and you're feeling like that. And that's because you've hit an overwhelm with the screens. You've got all of this input, and there's nothing that's kind of processing that and moving it through your body. And here we are with this state of being right now. You know, is that really working for you? And then they're allowed screen time when they get home from school, assuming we're not out at extracurriculars. Actually, that was the other thing I was going to say about screenagers. Was I think in recent years, in the last, let's say 10 years, there's been huge discussion around overscheduled kids.
Yeah, it has been.
Yes. But in screenagers, they really made the point of, in actual fact, kids are not scheduled enough, because it's the kids who don't have anywhere else to be that are on screens, and they're the kids that are having issues. And I really think that, like, I have really now been particularly preteens and having lots of friends with teenagers, I pick everybody's brain, because I would rather be handed the wisdom and be, you know, pre-prepared, to know how, you know, what the spectrum of thought is on a particular topic. And I often think the way to get through teenage years is to be so busy and to be so exposed to other forms of connection with other humans that you're not isolated on your own in a virtual world. And I would rather my kids were moving their bodies and interacting with humans than at home on a screen.
Yes.
So they are my thoughts. Where do you want to go from here?
No, they're really relevant and big thoughts, and I think that picks up on so many of the themes of that film. You know, how to practically implement, you know, different ideas and get past, I suppose, the challenges that are in the way. What really resonates for me, and I think about it in terms of perhaps women and girls and screens and social media, is how much we don't realise we become shaped by the culture that we surround ourselves with, and how debilitating that can be, particularly, although it's true for boys too, but particularly for girls growing up and all of the images that they're exposed to. I mean, I can remember being, you know, not even with screens, with Dolly magazine and with, you know, those kinds of magazines and the ideal that they held up.
You don't even have to open them. All you have to do is walk down a shopping centre aisle and just see the covers on a magazine. And already I feel like your reality is shifted. Yeah.
And so, you know, I recognise how much that was influential on me. And, you know, we have girls who are just spending every spare moment on Instagram and are curating their feed based on bodies and lifestyles and, you know, these kinds of contrived versions of what success or beauty look like. And I think that the danger is when that goes unchecked. and how we, beyond simply the practical steps of what you've talked about in terms of limiting, what we do to shore up self-esteem and self-confidence within kids to face the deluge of what the screens bring to them and bring into their world, because that is the work that starts for the parents who have the babies, the toddlers, the preschoolers, the primary years who are listening, because that is the important work. Because we can do all we can around the house, you know, in terms of our own screen limits and things like that, but that the child's inner world and their own self-belief is going to always be what they come back to when they feel that they've gone too far down a road. And that, I think, is what we're constantly sort of seeking to understand and answer for ourselves, which is a much trickier place to get to. I read a really interesting article on Hands-Free Mama, she's got a book.
Yeah, I like her.
Yeah, and she talked about the conversation that she had with her 14-year-old and how easy it would have been to just take her 14-year-old's word for it in terms of reducing screen time and recognising the dangers. But she had in her head the story of another mother who recently lost a daughter to suicide, and just thought, I'm not going to accept the comfort here of her words. I'm going to take it further, and we're going to transform the dynamic here. We're going to transform our relationship with screens so that we can transform our relationship with ourselves, because that is what the screens sometimes take the place of. Is the relationships that people have with themselves, because the screen can become the stand-in for all of the things you don't want to face within yourself. And that's a particularly dangerous, I think, thing to place in developing minds. You know, in teenage minds, in preteen minds, who are really finding their identity and largely live or die by their social circle, which for a lot of kids is online. You know, it is all about you know, what their friends are doing online and interested in online and connecting with online. And so that's the deeper work, and that's what I would be interested to understand, particularly with you facing, you know, high school soon, you know, what you want to shore up within your kids so that they know how to navigate that within themselves in terms of how that world might make them feel, and how to find the place in which to know when to pull back and to know when they're being overwhelmed by the outer world and that's colouring their inner world. Because those are the bigger things that I think screens ask us to face.
Look, I totally agree with you. I don't know that I've got the preformed wisdom yet. I think it's really still evolving as my kids sort of probably reach that stage, and I have to upskill my own toolkit to deal with it. Where I sit with it now, I suppose, is we already talk about our online identity, and that's generally a fairly accepted paraphrase in schools. Schools will do education on screens around your online identity. And, you know, as you know, you're not allowed to open up a Facebook or an Instagram account under the age of 16, I think it is.
13.
Is it 13? Yeah. But there's kids that certainly do much earlier through their parents. So there's certainly friends of my kids currently that have Instagram. Instagram seems to be the first choice over Facebook. I guess because of the curated feed, as opposed to Facebook, where it's a bit more open slather and more article related. Instagram's also a much younger demographic. Facebook is really more our age group demographic. So Instagram is generally where kids first start. So, you know, we talk a lot in our family about our identity and what we want to put out in the world, how we want to be perceived, how we want to be seen. And my husband really, who has been, you know, quite strong in his viewpoint around it never leaves. Whatever you put out there is there forever. And that comes from a place of he's in corporate, he hires people, and 100% of the time they are checking your online identity to know who you are. And I don't know specifics, but I imagine he's seen some pretty messed up stuff that has altered that person's ability to get a job or not get a job.
Yeah.
To be considered as a worthy candidate or not, regardless of their resume, they will check online first. So whatever your online identity is will follow you for life. So when you're coming to talking about, you know, cute, sexy pics online, putting your sexual self out there, what you might say or comment on, or, you know, what parties, you know, scenes and things you might be on there. Like, I mean, it's already happening for us in our world. There was a 13-year-old who's the brother of a friend of my son at his party, and you know, his parents put out a flyer to the other parents saying it's $20 a head for alcohol.
What?
At 13.
No way.
Yeah, and this kid has an Instagram account and a Facebook account, and he put on there, oh, I wish I had a hooker right now. Like, so I just think this whole virtual world, and look, I have plenty of friends who have whose kids are friends with my kids who have older siblings who are teenagers, and they're all talking about, particularly with girls, the sexy pic identity.
Yeah, right.
Is because now that curated feed, I mean, we've all seen it, right? The pouty lip, the hip to the side, the above angle, they all work on their perfected selfie. And they're projecting a certain image, and there's a lot of talk around what does that image say to you? What does it mean to you? How do you feel about that? How do you want people to feel about you? And that you really talk about how do you want people to feel about you? What do you want people to think and feel when they, you know, look at you and they resonate through this picture? And, you know, there's conversations there that I think are far-reaching. But I do think they, like you're saying, they start much earlier around that your worth is more than what you look like. And that you are worthy of love, because regardless of how it's happening, that's all we're seeking, is to be loved, to be adored. And what if you can be loved and adored without needing to be anything other than who you really are? And that's what it is, right? And we also talk in this house about, you know, uncomfortable feelings. So my son is a big one for that. So if I didn't have really strong, strict boundaries on screens, he would be the kid that's on screens 24/7. I have not a doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
But because he has a frenzy and an intensity to chase the screens, it makes me pull back even tighter.
Yeah, because you can see that.
Because I know what it's like I almost feel it's like a tantrum, right? It's like that tantrum that hasn't quite ended. And so he's looking for the next fix and the next fix to just kind of keep it under control, because it's far easier to do that and be, you know, entertained than it is to sit in the discomfort that's currently in my body.
Yeah.
And particularly as our kids are developing into teenagers, those feelings in their body and those hormones get really, you know, quite wild and intense. And you add in a little bit of fatigue, or so-and-so said something at playtime, and you have just got the perfect storm there. So unless you're willing to enter that space, I feel like screens are giving me the next tantrum stopper, right? Not the dummy, but they're a virtual version of that. So I already have those conversations, particularly with my son, because I can see his body even gets quite jittery when he hears me saying no. I can see the reaction as he's processing in his body. And so I will talk to him about that. I'll say, you know, those feelings you've got on the inside, that irritation, that kind of the frantic need to move, that's the reason we're not on screens right now, because we need to do something to move that. And so I will literally, you know, in essence, force him by removing his ability to disconnect. I will force him to find a way to connect with himself first and then with us. And once he's reconnected and he's regrounded, and I'll know that because all of a sudden he'll come back in and he'll be hanging out with his dad or he'll be playing with his sisters. I know he's come back in again. Yeah. And then we can have a conversation and negotiation around what that looks like. But I'm also really big on the minute conversations like we talked about last week, same with him. Yeah. I said, you know, you 100% of the time, you do not have to just take what I say. You are now at an age where we have an open dialogue. It's not, I control the situation. I said, I would far rather that instead of you know, stomping your foot and storming off in a rage, that you said, used an I statement with me. When you said that, Mum, I felt, and I really would like for these reasons. And so at the moment I'm trying to, I guess, help my son unlearn his autopilot reaction with me to just do what I say.
Yeah.
And find the same level of autonomy that he has with his peers, that to some extent I'm asking him to now integrate into his relationship with us. Yeah. Because I can see that now that we're moving to that stage of more autonomy, this is another handing over process of that. And if I try to hang on to control more and more and more, he's going to fire off from that. And honestly, standing on the precipice of teenage years, it terrifies me. So I'm looking at all of the ways that I can equip him for ever greater autonomy. I see him as reasonably secure in himself and with his peers. And in educational scenarios, I think he's pretty well toolkit there. But in his relationship with his mum and dad, there's still an infantile kind of relationship there. And not that he needs to be, you know, uber grown up, but it's this handing over process of now we need to start working on those irritated feelings and that shutdown and that disconnect. I'm wanting to call that out and use more I statements and work on that negotiation and that fair trade and that win-win rather than this win-lose. Because he's still, I can still see it in him that he's like, well, in order for you to win, I have to lose. And in order for me to win, you have to lose. And so we're talking a lot about that. So, you know, the same deal with screens. Is he's going to be at an age where, you know, soon he's going to need to catch public transport on his own and get himself to and from possibly school, possibly training. You know, he will likely have a phone for that. I mean, he'll definitely be having an iPad or a laptop for school. Like, we're going to need to transform what our screen relationship looks like. But I think it's also constantly explaining the why. You know, why blue light has that effect on us, why the wiring of our brain is set like that, why we, you know, have this desire to have more and more and more, and what we're running from when we're doing that, and what's the toolkit for dealing with those underlying feelings, and constantly coming back to our happy line of disconnect to reconnect.
Burn that onto the brain.
That's exactly right. And whenever we go camping or we have family time, it's an absolute no screen. No screens at all. And it's amazing how there's probably a bit of a withdrawal process.
Yeah.
And then we're fine. So, but that's why we've got rehab centres now for screen use, which is just blowing my mind.
You see how it gets to that though?
Yeah, I really can. I totally can. So, and again, that scares me because, you know, our kids are, you know, ultimately going to travel. My son wants to go and play college basketball in the States. And that, for me, feels like it's around the corner. Like, another 4 years or something, and he may no longer be under my control at all.
Yeah.
Like, at all. And it terrifies me.
Yeah.
And I was watching this kid in this documentary going, oh, my God.
Yeah.
And, you know, partly it's my fear that drives my desire to find how we can best equip all of our kids, but I guess I'm focused more on him at the moment to know themselves better, to bring more awareness to their emotional triggers, which I think screens are definitely part of. And that every time we want to disappear into them, I'd be asking why.
And I mean, it starts, I think that whole thing that you're talking about here starts so much, first of all, for the mothers listening who are wondering how to do that with their kids. It starts with us if we find out that that's true for ourselves as well, because as we know, like I think somebody was telling me, the average person who has a smartphone checks social media 100 times a day.
I don't doubt it.
Like, that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so what is that taking you away from? How is that interrupting creativity, imagination, self-belief, like all of these critical components that make us who we are? And so it's, unfortunately or fortunately, some of that uncomfortable work begins with us.
Yeah, it really does. And I also think putting limits on, so being really clear on what your family agreements are around screens and being completely clear on those. And that even when you're tempted to dodge the bullet of the tantrum to just let it go this one time, is to have the capacity to actually hold that boundary there and hold the space for the tears, because it's the emotion that's the issue, not so much the screen. It's the running from the emotion. The other thing I just thought then as you were saying that was because this is a virtual business, right? This is an online forum. Nourishing the Mother is online. And so, you know, I often think, you know, I'm on my phone doing social media or, you know, something or other, and it's, you know, I have to explain to my kids this is work. And part of what I find amazing about that is that work is unlimited now, right? You can find your niche, you can find your people, you can design, you know, your own lifestyle and work in a way that has never been physically possible before by virtue of the screen. Like, it's amazing.
So we have to make sure we love the screen, right? Because we appreciate the screen.
But also, you know, I think there's small amounts of exposing our kids to that too, because I can build a website. So I've built a website for basketball. I've built a website for kinder. You know, you and I manage our website, and I talk to my kids about that. We talk about the programming. We talk about how that works. You know, if they want to do a blog, I would support them in, you know, facilitating all of that. They're really interested in our Instagram feed and our Facebook feed. And if I ever post a photo of my kids, I ask their permission before I do that. And largely, they're really interested in that. They want to understand that. They want to be part of that. They're, you know, excited that they can be to some extent. So I also think there's huge gifts and conversations, and the ability to explore genius like has never been possible before by virtue of the screen. But I also think the motto should always be screens to our advantage, not to our disadvantage. And for me, that comes from an emotional space. That if we're disconnecting emotionally from ourselves or others, it's a problem. And if we're disconnecting, no. Can't even think what I was about to say then. But that's my point.
And it's a key one to come back to, and I think that kind of governs so much of why there is that screen addiction, because it is an enormous, not only is it a great information portal, but it's an incredibly great tool to disconnect.
It's a dopamine hit. I mean, we're charged, they've hardwired computer games, programs, advertising to specifically speak to our emotional brain, the brain that wants a hit of adrenaline and wants a hit of dopamine and keeps you coming back. Like it's genius, but at the same time you want to make sure it's being used to your advantage, not the advertiser.
That's right.
Anyway, let's wrap up, Bridge. We would love you to connect with us on nourishingthemother.com.au. We have Loathing to Loving coming up at the start of February, 5 weeks where you dive in with us and we start pulling apart your own self-awareness from top to bottom. We work through a different topic over 5 weeks, and you then have access to our members-only Facebook group where we have daily conversations forever in there and, you know, pop in and out with videos and answering questions. So we would really love you to check that out at nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs, Loathing to Loving. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Nourishing the Mother, and we love your comments, your questions, your podcast topic suggestions. And to connect with you, Bridget.
Suburbansandcastles.com.
And your next movie?
Is in February, and it's all around intuition. It's called PGS, Personal Guidance System. And it's a really, really fascinating film, so looking forward to that one. And to connect with you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com. All I had was Nourishing the Mother running through my head. I couldn't think. And remember, you've got to nourish the mother to rock the family, and that's the whole point of what we put out in the world that we really hope is happening in your world. So please dive a little bit deeper in Loathing to Loving with us and continue to rock your world. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.